There's a place deep in the heart of America where silence once screamed, and ashes whispered the truth. Tulsa, Oklahoma. Today, it's just another American city. But 100 years ago, it was home to something rare and powerful. A miracle, built from nothing. A neighborhood called Greenwood. They called it Black Wall Street. It was built by black hands for black lives. Rising from the soil of slavery and grown in the light of freedom, it stood tall, proud, and beautiful. Doctors, lawyers, tailors, bakers' children laughed in the streets. There were black-owned banks, schools, grocery stores, and even a theater that played the latest films. They printed their own newspaper. It was success. It was pride. It was proof that black people could thrive, even in a land that constantly tried to keep them down. But that success stirred something dark: envy, fear, and hatred. Because in America, black excellence was never just seen. It was watched, judged, and punished. All it took was a whisper, a rumor, a lie. On May 30th, 1921, a young black man named Dick Rowland entered an elevator. Inside was a white girl named Sarah Page. No one knows exactly what happened next. But she screamed, and he ran. The city lit up with fury. Whispers turned into headlines. Lies turned into weapons. The next day, a white mob gathered outside the courthouse. They wanted blood. They wanted Dick Rowland dead. But the black community came to protect one of their own. Tensions rose. Then, a shot was fired. The first of many. What followed was not a riot. It was not chaos. It was a plan, a purge, a massacre. As night fell over Tulsa, peace did not come with it. Downtown glowed with firelight, not from street lamps, but from the rage of a white mob. They stormed the streets with rifles, torches, and hate burning in their eyes. They didn't come just to punish. They came to destroy. Men, women, even children in Greenwood heard the screams first, then the gunfire, and then the fire itself. Flames rose high into the sky. Smoke poured between rooftops. The night turned red. Families ran barefoot, clutching babies in their arms. Elders collapsed from the smoke. Young boys tried to protect their mothers and sisters with broomsticks. They were met with bullets. Homes that took years to build were gone in minutes. Business signs melted into ash. Pianos, wedding photos, and Bibles all vanished into smoke. And then, the unthinkable happened. Planes appeared overhead, not military planes, but private aircraft owned by white citizens of Tulsa. They flew over Greenwood and dropped fire, incendiary bombs, Molotov cocktails, anything to make the flames spread faster. It was the first time in American history that a black neighborhood was bombed from the sky by its own citizens. Witnesses saw men leaning from the planes, laughing as they dropped fire onto churches, onto schools, and onto children. The world went silent, but Greenwood screamed. A mother carried her baby through the smoke, only to trip and never rise again. A young girl hid beneath a bed as white men kicked down her door and threw fire inside. Bodies lined the streets. Some were shot, some were burned, some were never found. Hospitals were torched. Nurses were shot in the back as they tried to save lives. Doctors who once healed the sick were hunted like criminals. And all the while, the police stood and watched. Some joined the mobs. Some handed out weapons. Others did nothing. The National Guard came, but not to protect black families. They disarmed them, arrested them, and marched them into detention camps at gunpoint. Meanwhile, white looters went door to door, taking what they wanted and burning the rest. It was not a riot. It was not a clash. It was annihilation. By the morning of June 1st, Greenwood was gone. 35 city blocks were turned to ash. Over 1,200 homes destroyed. Hundreds of businesses wiped off the map. Churches, libraries, schools, all vanished. More than 300 black men, women, and children were killed. Thousands were left homeless, penniless, and broken. And no one was ever held accountable. Not one arrest. Not one conviction. The city called it a race riot. But history knows better. It was a massacre, and it was covered up, silenced, and erased from textbooks, from news reports, from memory. But not from the soil. Even today, bodies are still being found, buried in secret, dumped in mass graves, and the earth still whispers their names. Morning came. But it brought no peace. The sun rose over Tulsa and shone upon a graveyard of ash. The once thriving streets of Greenwood were now nothing but charred skeletons. Smoke drifted between bricks and bones. The air was thick with silence and the stench of burned dreams. Survivors wandered like ghosts. their clothes torn, eyes hollow, voices gone. Children cried for mothers who would never answer. Fathers dug through rubble, searching for anything that remained. There was no help, no aid, no comfort. The city turned its back. The press turned away, and the world moved on, as if nothing had happened. But in Greenwood, everything had changed. Thousands of black citizens were herded into internment camps, held for days, some for weeks, not for protection, but for control. They were forced to wear tags, to answer to numbers, to prove their loyalty in their own country. White looters paraded through the ruins, wagons filled with stolen clothes, jewelry, and furniture. Some even smiled for photographs, proud of the fire they had lit. As for the bodies, some were taken away in trucks, others were buried in secret. Mass graves dug in haste, filled, covered, and forgotten. Hospitals were overwhelmed. Doctors worked in basements and burnt-out buildings. There weren't enough beds, or medicine, or hope. But still, the people of Greenwood tried to survive, tried to rebuild, tried to be human again. But the city blamed them. Insurance claims were denied. The reason? Riot damage not covered. Black families were left with nothing. No homes, no savings, no justice. And no one, not the mob leaders, not the shooters, not the arsonists, was ever punished. The newspapers called it unfortunate violence. Politicians said, it's behind us now. And history books stayed silent. For nearly a century. In classrooms, the name Greenwood was never spoken. The massacre was erased deliberately and systematically. But the survivors remembered. They told their children, and their children's children, in whispers, in pain, in the shadows of a nation that refused to look back. Years passed, decades, generations. The flames finally died down, but the scars remained. Thousands of survivors were left broken, with empty hands, empty homes, and empty hearts. Families that once celebrated life now mourned lost children, parents, and dreams. Many had nowhere to go, no money, no support. The city had turned its back on them. But even in the darkest times, hope found a way to flicker. Men, women, and children, survivors of that horrifying night, refused to be silenced. They gathered in churches, in basements, in quiet homes. They shared their stories, the screams, the fires, the planes above, the faces of those who disappeared. They mourned together. They healed together. They began to rebuild. But the road was steep. Insurance companies refused to pay. Banks denied loans. Many were forced to start over with nothing. And the world outside mostly looked away. For decades, the massacre was ignored. A painful secret, buried under layers of shame and denial. But the survivors remembered. They kept the stories alive, passing them down through generations. They fought in silence, holding on to the truth. In the 1970s and 80s, a new generation demanded justice. They called for investigations, for recognition, for reparations. Some progress was made. Memorials were built. Museums opened their doors. But full justice remained out of reach. Decades of denial left deep wounds. Many perpetrators never faced the consequences. Many victims never received compensation. Yet the spirit of Greenwood endured. The community rebuilt, slowly but surely. Black Wall Street rose from the ashes, not just in buildings, but in hearts and minds. Today, Tulsa remembers. The massacre is taught. The victims are honored. But the scars remain a reminder of the cost of unchecked hatred and growing silence. The Tulsa Race Massacre is not just a chapter in history. It is a warning, a call to never forget, a plea to never allow such hatred to rise again, because beneath the ashes are the voices of those who refuse to be forgotten.